Hey guys, fellow classmates, congratulations on our impending graduation. I'm going to give you a little presentation of my final project today, but it is more than just a presentation. I'm not one to typically celebrate myself at all. This was very difficult for me, but I do feel that after nearly 2 years and a lot of hard work, it was probably time to summarize some of my accomplishments, the completion of this final project, and just some overall life lessons I learned from graduate school. So, graduate school is nothing like I thought it was going to be. When I was an undergraduate, it was about reading the material, taking the test, and getting the right answers. In graduate school, we learn that there really are no right answers. There's good research and bad research. There's supported by evidence and not supported by evidence. All things are up for debate. It's about those great conversations you have with your peers inside the classroom, but more importantly, outside the classroom, and those professional connections that you make. It's about pushing yourself beyond your limits and really getting the most out of what you are doing here. It's also about perseverance and not quitting even when you really want to. And believe me, there were times I had thought about it and really wanted to. I think it is important for all of us to reflect on our accomplishments over the last 2 years. Take a moment, sit down, write them all down. Think about where you were and think about where you are today. There are things that didn't even make it onto this list for me, such as being able to sort through research quickly, pick out relevant points and put it into a publishable document. My writing skills are tremendously better than when I started. I also know how to produce and edit videos, which again is a skill that I never would have thought I would have gotten out of this program. Now for my capstone project. Why did I choose this? I admit when I started this master's degree program, I did it for selfish reasons. I chose a concentration in sports nutrition because I wanted to fix myself. Over most of my adult life, I have suffered from relative energy deficiency of sport and hypothalamic amenorrhea. Ended up with fertility treatments, which resulted in the birth of my 13-year-old quadruplets because of this condition. My goal as a coach, as a personal trainer, as a fitness professional, and as a nutrition coach is to ensure that female athletes understand the consequences of what they are doing now. Although I got a really good background in the sports nutrition side of things from my degree program, I was lacking a little bit in the actual training protocols for athletes that come with the strength and conditioning specialty. I decided that I would study for and pass the Certified Strength Conditioning Specialist exam from the National Strength and Conditioning Association to sort of complement my knowledge on this topic and really qualify me to work with these female athletes. I had been faced with difficult tasks before, but nothing like this one. This exam is not for the faint of heart. I remember watching the Facebook groups and seeing that the exam only had a 56% pass rate, and there were people who were strength and conditioning coaches or even sports coaches that have failed the exam over and over again. I joined the Facebook group, I bought a pocket prep app, I got the textbook, but I realized that I think that I had bitten off more than I can chew, and that learning an entire specialty for which I was unfamiliar with may have been a little bit of an unrealistic goal for a 7-week time frame. As I got deeper into my strength and conditioning studies, I started to see some differences in philosophy between organizations like the National Academy of Sports Medicine and the National Strength and Conditioning Association. Some of the concepts between human movement science and corrective exercise differ greatly from some of the concepts taught in strength and conditioning. One of my favorite master instructors from the National Academy of Sports Medicine used to tell me, "We train movement patterns and not muscles." That's very much the philosophy of personal training. Our assessments drive programming to promote long-term functional movement and optimal movement patterns. The National Strength and Conditioning Association is fixated more on athletic training because that is the job of a strength and conditioning coach, and hence the focus is more on sports performance. That may account for some of these differences in philosophy. It's not necessarily that one is right and one is wrong. It just may be that the population focus is different. I also noted some differences between recommendations from the International Society of Sports Nutrition and the National Strength and Conditioning Association. I will admit that when studying for my exam, which was very heavy in nutrition calculations, I had to relearn all of these recommendations. Here's a little comparative analysis. Pay special attention to the protein recommendations. As I noted, that was the biggest difference, though there wasn't as much emphasis on nutrient timing from the National Strength and Conditioning Association versus the International Society of Sports Nutrition. When it comes to clinical implications, these differences in recommendations and philosophy can make things difficult. How do we serve the athletes the best that we can, with consideration to optimizing movement patterns and long-term health? Which recommendations do we follow? Are there ways to merge these different viewpoints? Is there a middle way? This is a lot of what I am still trying to sort out. As for the hurdles, there were many. Trying to understand and retain that volume of information in such a short period of time was probably my largest hurdle. On top of that, I had to find the right review resources because, believe me, I sorted through some that were not so good. And then also having to make up for a lack of experience with this population, I really had to believe that I had a good foundation and was capable of passing this exam. Let's fast forward to test day, which was yesterday. The sheer amount of stress hormones running through my system beginning about 3 days ago and going into yesterday was unbelievable. I really tried to internalize some of the sports psychology concepts I learned from studying for this exam, maybe the ideal performance state, using some techniques such as progressive muscle relaxation and diaphragmatic breathing. But I will tell you that when I actually got into that test, all of that sort of went out the window. By some miracle, I managed to pull off what I thought was an impossible task and passed both sections of this exam. After taking the rest of yesterday to just reflect and waking up this morning to reflect some more, here's a couple of highlights that I came up with from yesterday's experience. I was pretty well prepared for the scientific portion of that exam. I believe I got an 87%, which is a pretty high score. However, once I got to the applied section about halfway through, I had resigned myself to failure. In fact, in my mind, which is something you don't want to do when it comes to sports performance, was evaluated my own performance and was imagining myself giving this presentation talking about failure and the life lessons I learned from not passing this exam. As it turns out, I passed this section by one question. The preparation questions were nothing like the real exam. I could see that there were several traps set up for the test taker where things were worded strangely, or they were worded in such a way that you would get the incorrect answer if you didn't really understand the concept. The exam also assumes that you've been working with athletes for as long as you can remember, which in my case, I have not. I agree that I need a lot more practice before actually working with this population and plan to continue taking classes, reading and learning as much as I can about strength and conditioning, even with this valid certification. Let's talk about what happened once I walked out of that exam. As soon as I got my paper that said I passed, I started to shake, gathered up my things, and then I walked out the door of the testing center and immediately just collapsed on the floor in the hallway. I sat there for a good 10 minutes just shaking, trying to calm myself down, collected my things, walked to the car, and then had to sit in the car for about half an hour before I felt safe to drive home. I couldn't eat much for the rest of the day. I came home and just had an awful headache and felt completely drained, tired, and overwhelmed. The worst part of it is when I went upstairs into my bedroom, I just sat there on the floor and cried for a good hour. And I couldn't understand why I had this reaction because I passed the exam. It's not like I had failed. But what I think I realized is all of the emotions, all of the stress, everything that went into the last 2 years just ended yesterday, accomplishing that last goal. I think it was just that letdown of all of those hormones that have been elevated for so long and pretty significantly elevated while it was taking the exam. Was it worth it? Absolutely. This program was worth every ounce of time, energy, blood, sweat, tears, and money that I put into it. I wish you all congratulations and best of luck in your future endeavors.